Hello and welcome to the gallery. My name is Jon and today we are continuing our delve into the Horus Heresy legions. Right, 4 down, 14 to go, and then a little bit of fun at the end of it. In my opinion, the next two legions mirror each other quite a fair bit. One legion is really the personification of 40k. I mean, it is the cover art. It's the Ultramarine, the Smurf boys. And the other one is the start of it all. It's Horus's sons, the Sons of Horus, the old Luna Wolves, and lore-wise one of my more favorite legions. But we're going to start with the Ultramarines, so let's just take a look at them. And we're going to start by painting the Ultramarine, the good guy, the most famous of legions, the blue boys that you see on outside of most of the boxes. And we're starting with Macragge Blue, and we're just washing him, giving him a general wash of known oil. And really going heavy-handed with this. We will fix up all the mistakes that we are making now later on, but we're just giving a general wash so it'll go into all the recesses and we get this nice lining, this black lining, without having to spend any time at all doing it, basically. Once this is dried, we're going back for Macragge Blue and we're doing a really heavy-handed dry brush, and this will get all those flat panels again to that lovely blue color and leave all the recesses black. Of course, you could start with a black undertone and then just do a dry brush of blue over that, but I felt this was a little bit easier and it has a better result in the long run. Just don't be stingy with it and don't forget any places, because then you will have a really streaky black spot here and there. Next we're getting Calidor Sky out, and it's a fairly lighter blue. Of course you could use whatever blue color you want, as long as it's lighter than the original blue color. And we're giving it a rather smoother dry brush this time around. We're trying to catch the edges and focusing maybe more on the top bits, so we get this feeling of edge highlighting and light and stuff like that. Next we're going to work on all the white bits, and instead of starting straight with white, I'm starting with Fenrisian Grey, which is a blue toned light grey color, and we're going to give everything 2-3 coats of this so we have a nice starting point for our white, because white can be tricky, and also because this has a slight blue undertone, it'll work well with the rest of the model, which has this blue tone, of course, because, well, it is a Smurf. So just give everything 2-3 coats of this. I went with 2, but it was a little bit streaky still, so I could have done with 1 more. And I'm also giving this 1 coat, 2 coats, perhaps even 3 coats for the actual coils of the plasma gun, because we want them to be bright later on. Therefore it's fine to start out with this tone now, since we have it on hand. Next we're dry brushing with White Scar, and I'm dry brushing the coil on the top. I'm dry brushing all the plumage on the top of his head, and I'm gonna dry brush the shoulder pad as well. Give that a really heavy-handed dry brush so you get a little bit of white on top of it, but you still have, or you can work it like that you have still this darker grey bluish tone on the back side or on the bottom or something like that, and you get some sort of on the cusp of edge highlighting going as well, which is fine and dandy. As you can see, I also put a little bit of grey and white on the hilt of the sword, and we'll be using a contrast paint over that later on. Granted, we'll also be using different tones of contrast paint base coats, the grey seer and the wraithbone, so you could do that on the hilt as well. But I had it out, this paint, so I used it. Next we're using the Black Templar contrast paint, and that is to get those lovely black lines in the plumage of the Smurf Marine. Just be careful with this. It's okay if it goes into the blue that's underneath the bristles, mainly because we yet to paint that, but don't let it go too far on the outside, so on the white bit, so it looks clean-ish. A little bit of Athematic Blue heavy-handedly on the coil, a little bit too heavy-handedly, so we get this blue tone coming from the bottom to a wider top on top, and that looks sort of powery-ish. Therefore, we're gonna just do this and leave it at that. Next, it's just some Sigvald burgundy on the wrapping on the hilt, and the hilt is done. We're not going overly too much into highlighting of these small bits. We're going to focus more on using less of the shades and the contrast paints and different paints that we're using, so the highlights will still be there and we don't have to worry too much about them. Because if we're doing speed painting, we don't want to go at highlighting and highlighting every little nuance that's on the model. It's just not the way to do speed stuff. Next, a little bit of grace here on the under armor, and even though it doesn't go all the way to the edge, it doesn't matter because we're putting black Templar over it, and that'll hide everything and give you a sort of a crisp line, if you will. And then the under armor is done. We'll be using this method on most of the under armor through this year's various undercoats, both gracier, both silver, but this time it was gracier. Next, we're starting on the metallics, and there are a fair few metallics, and this is the longest step of everything, because there are metallics here and there, and I even missed one, the Aquila on his hat. I missed that one, and it's still unpainted in my shelf, and that's fine. I mean, I can put another golden dot there later on, but it doesn't really matter overly too much, to be honest. I have this thing with Ultramarines that I really don't like them, so this was a chore. A little bit of silver in the eye lenses and on the lenses on the top of his helmet. It just makes it a fun look. Once you start putting some contrast paint on top of that, you get this shiny, interesting look to it. And then, of course, this bright silver on the sword as well. I'm using Vallejo airbrush silver, and I love this color. It is awesome. It's the best silver color around, in my opinion. And I'm putting silver also on grenades because I want a little bit of shiny grenades. It feels like this guy would really be pompous with his grenades, so shiny grenades for this boy. And of course he has a little bit of silver here on the backpack as well, so we're gonna have to paint that in. It's the coils and the exhausts and the bigger exhausts and all that. So just to work around the model, find all the pieces you want to have silver, and or metallic, steel, whatever you want to call it, and paint them in that color. And you can, like the gun, you can see I put just a little bit of silver there because I'm going to work more gold into that and make it a little bit more pompous. Next, it's the gold, and of course it's the pommel and the guard of the sword, and then it's mainly just little bits here and there, a little bit on his chest, a little bit on his gun. Most of the casing of the gun is going to be golden because he is a fancy man. He is a leader of some sort. I don't know, don't really care. But he has this golden trim here and there, so golden on the hat decorations, and golden on the gun, golden on the sword, a little bit on the center chest bit. And it just gives it a little bit more flavor. And I'm using Retributor armor because it's a warm gold color. It's a very striking, bright gold color, and I feel that's fitting for this little guy. And of course, don't forget the little globules on his pauldron. They need to be gold too, because why not? Now, for all the silver bits, I'm using Nuln Oil, and I'm not using it sparingly, but I am dragging it out. So the points I want to be brightest, I'm taking as little Nuln Oil there as I can, and it works very well with this silver paint because it's so crisp and clean that the paint almost flows away from it, so you keep those shiny highlights because the Nuln Oil is not sticking to it. And then you don't need to do any extra highlighting or anything like that. But be careful to drag it away. You don't want it to pool. Then you have to go into highlighting mode, and we're trying to skip that phase basically. Raglan Flesh Shade, I'm using a regular one. You could use a gloss one, of course, and I would recommend it actually. And we're just putting that over all the gold, and it'll give it a warmer, richer golden hue, which is, as I said before, quite fitting for this guy. And after all of this is done, we're just going to have a little bit of spots here and there, a little bit of something that needs extra bits, like the lenses on his thing on the helmet, and of course for his actual eye lenses, putting a little bit of Raglan Flesh Shade, no, not Raglan Flesh Shade, Dark Angel's Red in there, also on the grenades, and we get these shiny shiny red grenades, which is, I think, kind of fitting for him, and it goes well with the blue armor in a strange, weird sort of way. And of course he has this powered sword, so I'm using Aethermatic Blue, a dollop on the origin point, and I did 2-3 dollops around it just to get it a little bit bluer, and then just a little bit of feathering of blue around, so it has this feeling that there is some sort of power going there. And it looks okay-ish enough in my opinion. Now that the boys in blue are done, let's continue on with something a little bit darker in theme. And next it's the Son of Horus, and it's a pretty similar paint job to the one previously. However, there are slight nuances that are different. We're starting, of course, with a different color. It's a lubrical green, and we are washing that with a 50-50 mix of dark angel's green and contrast medium, and really washing it heavily. We want it again to set in all the recesses and all the little lines here. We're doing our line work now before we do anything else, basically. So we're brushing it over everything and letting it dry completely before the next step, and we're back with the lubrical green and we're dry brushing over everything. We want maybe a little bit of darkness here and there in the underneath the hands and stuff like that, and that's fine, but we're trying to keep the green color coming back but keeping the other thing in the shadow so it looks nice. Then a little bit of Lisi and light dry brushing of Sons of Horus green just on the edges, on the corners, just to get some highlights going, and it looks pretty nice, I must say. And immediately we're getting this really interesting armor going. Next we have to work on different tones of colors here and there, and I'm using both Wraithbone and Greyseer. Now both of these colors are, in my opinion, not the best technically, but I'm using them and they were getting a little bit chunky, so I thinned them out a little bit with some airbrush medium and stuff like that. So I had to use 2-3 coats to get an even enough feel, and of course we're trying to keep this out of focus because why would you need to see what I'm talking about? For obvious reasons. The Wraithbone is done, that's basically on the leather bits and on his face, and then the Greyseer is going on the armor casing, and it's going here and there where we want a little bit more interesting color and a little bit colder color. But the Wraithbone gives a warmer undertone and the Greyseer gives a slightly cooler, more unfeeling undertone. So on the armor casing, on his under armor, on his shoulder pad as well, and of course on the ridges on the back of his power pack, we're gonna have that all in the Greyseer. And like I said, there's a slight difference between the two tones. One has this slight yellow hint to it, which is really good for everything that you want to look slightly organic, and for everything you want to look a little bit more manufactured, I would definitely go for the Greyseer. Now that these both have dried, we're gonna start fleshing it out. Hey, see what I did there? I'm using Gulliman flesh, 50-50 mixed with contrast medium on his face. I want it pale, I want it sickly, and if I would just use Gulliman flesh, he would look almost like he had a slight tan, and I want him a little bit on the sicklier side. Next it's snakebite leather, and that's going on all the leather straps, both on his gun as well as on the gas mask he has on hanging on his side. And if you have models with any sort of leather bits, I would just throw some Wraithbone and then a little bit of snakebite leather on top, and it looks fine. Now my favorite color apparently for this video, Black Templar, we're back at it again, and we're putting it on his bulbous pauldron, also on the gun casing, on the black of the power pack, on the ridges that we have there, and also on the under armor. This is a dark model, so there's a lot of black and a lot of dark green here. So those little bits that are not in the dark color, they really do sell the point, and they really do help out. Like the brown leather, like the exposed face. It really does help the point so it won't look too bland on the tabletop. That's just my opinion, but hey, it's my opinion. I'm painting the model, so that's what we're going for here. A little bit of militarum green on this grenade. It's not shiny red like the Ultramarine grenade, but nice enough. A little bit of carbo crimson around the eyes and around the actual metallic bits on his head. It makes it look a little bit more
well, sickly and strained and disturbing, and I like that look. I find it fitting for guys like this to have a little bit of a nerving look and just not this one tone, a little bit of pinkish hue here and there. Next, we have a lot of metal to cover. Now it's basically just similar to the Ultramarine. We're going over the entire model. There are silver bits here and there. There are gold bits here and there. We're using the same silver, but we're using a different gold. We're using the brass scorpion gold. It's a little bit darker. It's not as warm, and it's not as, well, goody two-shoes as the other one. So let's just paint up the metallics and then move on to the next bit. And now that we've painted up all the metallics, let's start shading them. And it's a similar way that we used before. We're using null oil for the silver bits or the metallic bits, and trying to have it not pool too much and not overly drench it, because we want the shininess of the silver to show through. And with this silver paint, it really does work just to put the null oil top, and you keep the silver going, because this runs away from the metallic, so it will only settle in recesses. And then for the golden bits, we're using the Cryptek Armor shade, and this is a glass shade as opposed to the Reichland Flesh shade that I used, which was not. And it's just going over the gold bits, a little dollop here, a little dollop there, trying to keep the top bits exposed as much as possible so we don't have to go into highlight mode afterwards. And here we have them, the Smurf Marine, the Ultramarine. I'm sorry, people might be offended by that, but I'm not really a fan of the Ultramarines. Something about them that rubs me the wrong way. And the Son of Horus. Out of the two, I liked painting the Son of Horus more, but the Ultramarine had some interesting things that I might expand on later on. The whiteness with and everything like that. It was fun, and I'm not used to painting overly too much of that. But out of the two, I like them both a little bit, but neither one of them are really something that I can see myself in the future painting a lot of. But I'm glad to have them, because they are the next two models for the growing set that I'm working on, and that is the name of the game. Now here we have two of them, and they are joining their 4 friends that I've already painted up in previous videos. Thank you very much for joining me here today. There are links in the description for all kinds of stuff, social media and various tidbits. You do with it what you will. Like, share and subscribe, and let the colors flow. But until next time, farewell.